I smoothed my dress with a sigh. I had come to this party hoping to meet somebody interesting. It seemed like I would be disappointed. Just as I turned to drop my glass, I heard a masculine voice behind me. "Hello, beautiful." The man looked to be in his 50s. He was handsome and had a sturdy build. I raked my eyes down, taking in his perfectly tailored suit. I didn't miss the Rolex on his wrist either. Everything about him screamed money. I responded with a hello and accepted his outstretched hand. He surprised me by putting it to his lips, kissing the back of my hand. I hid a smile. Thankfully, someone interesting. We made small talk. When I found out that he was the owner of RY Technologies, one of the leading tech firms, my ears perked up. I pushed the fact that he was older by almost 3 decades to the back of my mind. He collected my number during the party and called me the next day. He told me he just wanted to spend time with me. He took me shopping and stayed in the waiting room as I tried on dress after dress. I was floating on cloud 9. A girl could definitely get used to this. Throughout the week, he treated me to various sights and experiences. We went for jewelry shopping and he pampered me with whichever ornament I put my finger on. He was very attentive too, listening as I told him about myself. I told him I was an only child. My parents were living in another state and I only visit them during holidays. "Move in with me, Ashley," he said, one hand wrapped around my wrist. I appeared to think about it for a few minutes, laying my head on his chest. Inwardly, I was screaming with joy. "Okay, Pablo." He showed me the kitchen, but explained that I didn't have to exert myself. He had people who worked for him and took care of all his needs. His workers' quarters was somewhere else in the compound. The basement was off limits. When I asked him why, he said personal reasons. I shrugged. If he had secrets, it was none of my business. His driver drove me to work the next day, and I drank in the shocked expressions of my workmates. Yes, I'm rich now. I worked with a publishing company as an assistant editor. I sat at my desk plotting. If possible, I would make Pablo take me shopping again and buy me enough shoes to last me a lifetime. If I could make him buy me a car, it wouldn't be too bad. Then I would leave him. I was 27. I couldn't stay with an old man. I grinned as I resumed work. I had stayed with Pablo for 3 weeks. Before long, I started to get curious about the basement. No one went in except him, not even the workers. He would slip out of the bed when he thought I was asleep and go for about 2 to 3 hours. I didn't know exactly when he came back because I was usually asleep by then, no matter how hard I tried to stay awake. It was a Saturday, and Pablo was out for a business trip. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, biting my bottom lip. I tried the door handle. Locked. I let out a breath, removed a pin from my hair, and put it in the lock. Luckily, those YouTube videos come in handy. After rummaging for about 2 minutes, I was about to give up when I heard a successful click and eased the door open. I went down the stairs with some trepidation. It was dark and smelled awful. I flipped the switch and my legs gave out as I took in what was before me. There was a man with wires in his head. The wires were connected to a machine that showed data charts. He opened his eyes and he looked at me. When he saw me, tears slipped from his eyes. "Help!" "What?" I swallowed. "What's the meaning of this?" He told me that Pablo was keeping him for crazy experiments. His firm, RY Technologies, had been secretly trying to install microchips into human test subjects. They wanted to fuse humans and tech. They believed it could be a huge breakthrough, except that the people they had used till then had all malfunctioned and died. They had a secret research facility, but sometimes 1 or 2 subjects were also tested at this makeshift facility at Pablo's house. "They've done monstrous things," he shuddered. "I had things put in and out of me so many times that I lost count." I heard tires on the driveway and I gasped in fear. I ran up the stairs and quickly shut the door. Where was my phone? I found my phone just as the door opened. I quickly smoothed my features and smiled as Pablo came in. "Did your business trip get canceled?" I asked, looking concerned. He nodded and gave me a kiss. He went upstairs to shower and I ran to the kitchen trembling. I dialed 911. Once the call connected, I cried into the phone, telling them to send the police. I was in the hands of a monster, I said. They asked for the address and I gave it to them, asking them to hurry. Who were you talking to? I jerked at the sound of Pablo's voice. I dropped my phone on the counter calmly and turned to face him. I told him I was talking to myself. He shook his head amused and led me out of the kitchen. Don't look towards the basement. Don't look, I said to myself. Pablo looked towards the basement, seeing lights under the door. I forgot to put off the lights. I had no plan in my mind, but when he turned around to look at me, I turned away from him and ran, pumping my arms wildly. He crashed into me after a few steps, tackling me to the floor. I'd forgotten how fit he was. You had no business snooping in what doesn't concern you, he growled. I can't let you go now. I'm sorry. My face paled. He carried me down to the basement. Ignoring my kicks and punches, I screamed all the way down. His breathing was rough as he tied my hands together. The man hooked into the machine looked at me sadly as I struggled. Pablo injected me with a strange blue liquid and I screamed at the violation. We heard the sirens of the police and I sighed in relief. You called the police? You really don't know how the system works, do you? How do you think I'm able to fund my research, get the infrastructure and grants? Didn't think you'd be so naive to do such a thing. He slammed my head to the floor and I embraced unconsciousness. When I came around, I was in the hospital. The doctor informed me that I had fallen from stairs and suffered a mild concussion. He also told me to forget what I had seen or heard in the last 3 weeks, as that was in the best interest of my safety.
Welcome to the party, I yelled as my guests arrived. There were just 4, 3 guys and 1 girl. I wanted a small party. Though I wasn't close to them, I thought I knew them enough to invite them over. I had ordered boxes of pizza and more than enough drinks to go around. My speakers were blasting with heavy metal music, just the right kind of appropriate for us. I set up video games and started to play with the other guys. The girl, Alexa, moved near the speakers and started to dance. She was dating Kevin, and he would occasionally look up from the game he was playing to smile at her direction. I noticed that Douglas, one of the other guys, was sneaking glances at Alexa. I smirked to myself as I observed the love triangle. Alexa coaxed her boyfriend to join her, and they danced together, showing some silly moves which made everyone laugh. Soon, the rest of us joined them and we danced, enjoying ourselves. Kevin asked me for my bathroom and I pointed it out to him. He left us, saying that he would be gone for a while. Alexa continued to shimmy and wiggle to different songs. Douglas approached her from behind and laid his hands on her waist. Mason, the last of the guys, exchanged glances with me. I merely shrugged and took a sip. If he wanted to dance with someone else's girlfriend, it was none of my business. Alexa turned to Douglas and smiled. They were oblivious to our presence. Mason and I watched as Douglas lowered his head and kissed her. Alexa kissed him back with full force, clutching his shirt. My eyes widened. Kevin could be back at any moment, but they didn't seem to care. They were lost in their own world, touching each other everywhere, lips locked. Mason shook his head, muttering that they were both looking for trouble. I laughed, clearly entertained. We heard a door slam, and Alexa quickly got down and disentangled herself from Douglas. When Kevin entered the living room, Douglas and Alexa were breathing hard, looking away from each other. Mason and I quickly pretended to be engrossed with something else. Alexa walked up to Kevin and hugged him, breaking the tense moment. When I mentioned I had a pool table in the basement, Mason and Kevin jumped up and made their way downstairs. Douglas followed and Alexa trailed behind. I stayed in the living room playing video games. After about an hour, Douglas came in looking disheveled. I said nothing, even though I had a suspicion that he had been with Alexa. Mason later came in and we continued to play video games and drink beer. 2 hours passed and Kevin barged into the living room looking livid. "Who's the asshole who dared to sleep with my girl?" Kevin roared as he came into the living room. We all looked up at him, trying to look perplexed. I resisted the urge to glance at Douglas, who the rest of us knew had been making out with Alexa in Kevin's absence. Alexa was behind him, tears on her face. Her mascara had been smudged and she was looking down. She bit her lip and crossed her arms, not looking in our direction. "Answer me!" Kevin yelled again. I put my hands up. "Calm down, bro. Don't you dare tell me to calm down!" Kevin yanked out a gun from the waistband of his pants and we all froze. I held my breath. Oh shit. He was a bit drunk, but I hoped he would have enough sense left to drop the gun. I was still frozen to a spot. I'd never been in a situation like this before. I had only seen them play out in movies. My mind raced as I thought about what to do. Normally, in the movies I had watched, the hero would execute some complicated karate moves and snatch the gun successfully. I was no hero, and I was too scared to attempt anything. Mason moved back slowly, telling Kevin in a calm voice to drop the gun. Probably this angered him further, and he started to shoot like a madman. Alexa started to scream as gunshots rang out. I heard the vase next to the game console shatter. He shot a few more times in rapid succession. Each time, something close to me got hit. I looked up in horror as Kevin was clearly aiming for me now. During that moment of impending death, all I heard was a series of empty clicks. Douglas let out a loud laugh. "You're out of bullets, man." I had no idea if it was the alcohol in our systems, but Mason and I started laughing too. It was probably stupid of us to further enrage him, but we didn't seem to care. Kevin visibly got angry, his eyes getting bloodshot. He dropped the gun and reached into the side of his boot. When he pulled out a knife, our laughter died and we quickly sobered up. Kevin charged towards us and Alexa screamed for him to stop. We saw that Kevin had no intention of stopping and scattered in different directions. He went after Douglas first, which made sense since he started the laughter. Kevin held him by his neck and plunged the knife into his shoulder. Douglas yelled and tried to use his other hand to push him off. Mason approached from behind and pulled Kevin back from Douglas. Kevin pulled out the knife as Mason dragged him back. He turned around sharply and stabbed Mason in the shoulder too. Mason dropped him to clutch his shoulder that was pouring blood. "I will have the last laugh," Kevin yelled angrily. I was behind the sofa watching everything play out. Alexa was beside me, covering her mouth with her hands as she sobbed quietly. I looked at her, disgusted and angry with her. My front door got kicked open and 2 policemen charged in, guns drawn. "Hands up!" they ordered. They tackled Kevin to the floor and collected the bloody knife from him. Kevin struggled, but was no match for the brute force of the cops. They pinned him down and handcuffed him. An ambulance was called for Mason and Douglas, and they were carried away to be treated. Mason was glaring at Alexa, and she cowered under his stare. She went out with them, looking pasty white. My neighbors had reported the sounds of gunshots from my house, and the police had reacted swiftly. Sirens blared from outside. The cops took down our statements and left with Kevin at the back of their car. I cleaned up my house and thought over the events that happened. I could have died, actually. It was just hitting me as the buzz of the alcohol died down. That thought sobered me up completely. It was senseless for me to invite people I didn't know well enough to my house. I took some aspirin and went to get some well-deserved sleep. I decided not to think too much about it, but I knew that I would no longer see them.
I walked home quickly, happy it was already the weekend. My job at the office really took a lot from me mentally. My apartment was on the 3rd floor and I usually took the stairs to get some exercise in. Today, I decided to take the elevator. I just wanted to rest. "Hey!" I turned around as I was trying to open the door to my apartment. "Hey!" I replied. A guy was standing in the doorway of the apartment opposite mine. He must be a new tenant. "I just moved in," he said excitedly. "My name is Joseph." "Alex." I shook his outstretched hand. He seemed to be an okay guy. He told me he moved away from his former place because he wanted a fresh start. I went inside and watched some TV before finally going to sleep. The next day was a Saturday, and I woke up a little late, stretching lazily in my bed. I noticed I was out of groceries and rushed to the store to get some. I went to the elevator when I came back, my bag of groceries in my hand. Joseph was inside the elevator already. He was holding a toolbox. He greeted me and told me the locks were for his apartment. I frowned and told him our neighborhood was very safe, especially our building. He shrugged it off and said no one could ever be too careful. I supposed he was right. I saw little of Joseph the rest of the weekend. He was always holed up in his apartment. Sometimes I could hear him screaming at someone to leave him alone. We formed a cordial acquaintance over the next few days, greeting each other well. It was a Tuesday and I got home late from work. I crashed on my bed without eating. I fell asleep almost immediately. Was someone knocking on my door? I opened my eyes and stood up. The knocks grew louder, insistent. I opened the door to see who it was, but to my greatest surprise, it was Joseph. He looked troubled, his eyes darting around. He told me some people were after him and they would find him soon. When I asked him how he knew, he said he just did. That was the reason why he moved here. I just sat down looking at him. I couldn't fathom why he was so scared. I asked him to call the police and he got even more scared, trembling. He said the police couldn't be trusted. The last time he reported to the police, they threatened to lock him up. And you're sure these people will find you? What do they want from you anyway? I asked. I don't know, man. I only know that they want to kill me. I began to think that Joseph was hiding something. Perhaps he stole from them or did something that landed him in trouble. He seemed to think he was innocent, though. Keys jingled outside and Joseph jumped. I rolled my eyes and checked through the peephole. It was just Miss Maria, the cleaning lady. I opened the door, ignoring Joseph's protests. I smiled at her. She was very efficient in her job. She kept cleaning the building. Miss Maria asked if there was anything else she could do for us. I shook my head in the negative. Joseph lunged at her, knocking her to the ground. I shouted in fright and tried to pry him off of her. He finally got up, but Miss Maria was unconscious. They can turn anyone over. It's what they always do. Joseph, are you sure you're fine? I was beginning to think he wasn't. He just knocked out the cleaning lady for nothing. I told him to sit. I rubbed my face. How was I supposed to explain this when she woke up? I quickly closed the door after confirming that no one witnessed what happened. I brought out my phone, attempting to call the ambulance. Joseph looked up at me and asked what I was doing. I replied that I was just calling the ambulance for Miss Maria. Oh no, they got you too. You can't kill me. He rushed from the chair. Everything was happening in slow motion. 1 minute, Joseph was sitting on the couch. The next minute, he tackled me to the floor, bending my arm behind me. 911, state your emergency. Help, I gasped. Calm down and tell us what's going on. Joseph tried to cover my mouth. I never noticed how strong he was. Someone's trying to kill me, I said amidst struggles. Joseph punched me and I heard a crack. He just broke my nose. A high ringing sound pierced my ears. I flailed, truly panicked. I was sure Joseph was not normal. My elbow connected with something soft and I heard a grunt from Joseph. I jabbed him with my elbow again and was appeased to hear him groan. Hello, are you there? My phone was still connected to 911. I tried to reach for it. Apartment 34, Old Mason Lane. I hoped they heard the directions. Joseph punched my face again and I roared in pain. I saw movement in the corner of my vision. Miss Maria was stirring. She stood up shakily and saw my struggling beneath Joseph. My face was bloody. Her face paled and tears welled in her eyes. I shook my head, urging her not to make a sound. Joseph was occupied with trying to keep me down. He didn't notice Miss Maria grabbed the umbrella I usually kept by the door. She hit him on the back of the head, and he stood up and looked toward her angrily. She screamed as she raised the umbrella again. He caught it as she tried to hit him. He then slapped her across the face. As I was now free of his weight, I mustered all my strength and pushed him hard. His head connected with the floor with a thunk, but he remained conscious. Bring the umbrella, I yelled at Miss Maria. I held him down and she hit him on the head till he passed out. There was a silence as Miss Maria and I stared at each other. Then she fell to her knees and broke down in sobs. I stood up, trembling. I went to the sink and washed my face, feeling numb. Miss Maria was hugging her knees to the body, scared to the core. We heard sirens getting louder. The police burst in a few minutes later and questioned us. Miss Maria took a while to calm down before she narrated what happened. After Joseph was treated, he was put into custody. During his court trial, it was established that he had a mental illness, one that caused acute paranoia and mistrust. He was diagnosed with paranoid personality disorder, PPD. Joseph was taken to the psychiatric ward where he continued to receive treatment and therapy. I took a long overdue leave from work to get myself back together. It took the threat of death to realize that I wasn't living my life to the fullest. Let me tell you a story about what happened to me about 2 years ago. I was fresh out of high school and I had my entire life in front of me. Yeah, the future looked bright, but one decision changed my life forever. So as I was saying, I was out of high school and had pretty chill parents. I kept talking with them about my future and deciding what I wanted to do. My dad came up with the bright idea that I shouldn't rush into picking a college and see where life takes me. He suggested that I take a year off and get a job so I can get some real-world experience. I thought about it a couple of days and finally, I came to the conclusion that it was the best thing for me. So, after high school, I started looking for a job, and before I knew it, I had my first interview and I was hired. It wasn't something glamorous, not even close to that. It was a job as a barista in a local coffee shop. The place was pretty unique, as it served coffee with different types of foam art in it. I eventually learned how to do some leaves and hearts. I wasn't particularly good at it, but let's get to the point of the story. A guy came in, and from the first moment I saw him, I had a crush. He was tall and had green eyes. Oh, and a smile to die for. Yeah, he was pretty much out of my league, but surprisingly, he was into me. At first, we didn't talk. We just looked at each other and smiled. As he started to come to the coffee shop almost every day, I learned what type of coffee he liked to drink. And while coming to the counter to make an order, I would already say it for him. The entire situation was cute. One day, he gathered the courage to ask me out, and in my mind, I was like, finally. We exchanged Snapchats, and later that evening, we met at a nice Chinese restaurant. I was so excited, and to be honest, I acted kind of dumb at first, staring into his beautiful green eyes. But as he started talking, things got a little weird. He seemed angry for no reason, and his mood would fluctuate from being calm to being nervous and angry, all in a span of a couple of minutes. It was really unsettling. Also, he told me that he was into snakes and had one at home. I didn't really like that. Anyway, the date didn't go the way I pictured it in my head, and I decided not to see him again. I was polite, and I told the guy that it wasn't going to work out. He seemed fine at first, but I didn't know how he actually felt about it. Even though I told him that we don't have anything in common and it wasn't going to work, he continued to Snapchat me. He would send me weird selfies of himself with his snake and other things that would make my skin crawl. One time, he Snapchatted me a video of his snake eating a live little white mouse. I told him that it was disgusting and I don't want to see these kind of things, but he just laughed, without acknowledging what I just told him. For about 2 or 3 weeks, the snaps stopped. I was finally relieved that he forgot about me, and I wouldn't have to be fearful each time I received a snap from someone, thinking that it was something from him. One day, as I was at my job, another cute guy came in. We hit it off right away, and he seemed nice. Well, the other one seemed nice, and look where that got me. So I was careful. I didn't accept to go out with him at first, but as we started talking and Snapchatting, I noticed that we really had a lot in common. He liked traveling, and I made sure that he didn't like snakes or having a snake for a pet. That was a green light for me to go out with him. So, one evening, we went to the movies. It was a comedy, and we laughed the whole way through. He had the cutest laugh. Anyway, after that, I invited him to come over to my place, as I was living alone, for some non-alcoholic drinks, and he accepted. We got there, I went to the kitchen to prepare something, and then we sat on the couch and talked for about 2 hours. Sparks were flying through the air. We were really compatible. As I was touching his arm, I got a notification on my phone. I didn't want to ruin the moment, so I decided not to check it. But then I got 2 more, one after the other. All these scenarios popped into my mind, and thinking that it may be something important, I got up to see who it was. Horrified, I saw that it was the guy, Snapchatting me, again. I opened the messages and saw that he was telling me in all caps to get that guy out of the house. He wasn't good for me and that I needed to get back with him. I told him that we were never together and I was putting down my phone. I realized that he knew someone was in my house, so I asked him how did he find out, but he didn't reply. I was getting a bad feeling, so I wrote him another message asking him again. All of a sudden, my front door got kicked in. It was the guy, and he had a crazy look on his face. He also had a crowbar in his hand. I yelled, and the guy that I was on a date with got up from the couch, being confused. Without even looking at me, with his eyes fixated on my date, the weird guy attacked him. He started hitting him with the crowbar over the head, repeatedly until blood started spraying all over the living room. I was yelling and crying at the same time, without knowing what to do, but I quickly snapped out of the shock and I called 911. The guy continued beating him over and over. When the police came, he was still hitting him, but my date was dead, and had been for some time. His face was unrecognizable. The 2 police officers came, jumped the guy, and managed to put handcuffs on him. As they were taking him away, I looked at the dead body and couldn't believe that this happened. Then I glanced at the killer, and with his face covered in blood, with only his eyes showing, he smiled at me and said, "You should have turned off your location services on Snapchat." The police later told me that the guy was an engineer and a professional hacker. The good part is, it's been several years since the incident, and he's still in jail. Traveling all around Europe was so much fun for me. Why didn't I do this earlier? I thought that Italy was my favorite, but Spain seems to be topping the list right now. I brought out my phone to search for the nearest restaurant to my motel. The receptionist was kind enough to recommend me the best. I headed out to the restaurant that was 5 minutes away and had good Yelp reviews. Reaching the driveway, I stared in awe at the amazing architecture of the restaurant. The beautiful structures are one of my favorite things in Spain. I noticed that the security personnel was holding the door open for me, and I briskly walked in, apologizing for keeping him waiting. He smiled and said it was fine. I walked in, went to sit at the most secluded empty booth, and looked at the menu, trying to decide what to eat. As I signaled the waitress, 2 bubbly girls walked in laughing. The waitress walked up to my booth and took my order. As I looked up from my menu, I saw those same girls in front of me taking a place at my booth. "You took our spot, but you look new here, so I'll let it slide," the blonde girl said with a smile. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that. I'll just leave." I started to pack. "No, you don't have to. We can share," the shy dark-haired girl said. "I'm Dora and she's Clara. Nice to meet you both. I'm Nate," I answered. "So what brings you to Spain?" Clara asked. I started to tell them about my decision to take a gap year from college after my junior year. It was spontaneous, and I just needed to take a break from everything, and winning a sponsorship lottery to take a trip around Europe was the perfect opportunity I couldn't let go of. I talked about how I started from Italy and ate the best pizza I ever tasted, then traveled to France and saw the Eiffel Tower. Telling them about my adventures in Amsterdam was the last straw that broke the camel's back. "Oh my goodness," Clara yelled. "You had so much fun, I'm jealous." "Me too," Dora sulked. "Let's not get sad, ladies. There's plenty of time," I laughed. "Speaking of time, we have to go now. Do you mind exchanging numbers?" Clara asked. "I don't mind," I said. I exchanged numbers with both girls and bid them goodbye. 3 days after I met the girls, I received a text from Clara saying, "Hey newbie, you want to hang out? Meet us at this location." And they tagged their location to the text. I replied saying I'd be right there. Jumping out of bed, I took a long shower that felt weirdly refreshing. After that, I took my blue vintage shirt and shorts and dressed up. "You're one fine son of a gun," I chuckled as I watched myself in the mirror combing my hair. Walking out of the hotel, I felt the familiar cool breeze of Spain run along my skin, and I smiled. This is going to be a great day, I thought as I put on my sunglasses. Following the directions of the map, the location was about 20 minutes away, so I requested for an Uber ride. Waiting for my ride, I began to reminisce of all the past experience as a teenager and how much I've grown and become a better person as an adult. I've really done a lot of stuff I regret, and hopefully I'll find a way to fix it all. most especially that of Gloria. I wonder where she was now. My thoughts were interrupted by the honking of a car horn that signaled the arrival of my ride. I entered the cab and shared the location with the driver. As the car moved to my destination, I took my time to enjoy the serenity of Spain because I was leaving in a couple of days. "You reached your destination," I heard the Uber driver say with a very strong Spanish accent. I thanked him with a smile and paid in cash with an extra tip. I was in a good mood. Confirming the location, I saw a beautiful block of flats that were meticulously designed. Spain has such beautiful architecture, I thought. I texted Claire I was downstairs, and she asked me to take the elevator up to the 3rd floor and ring the bell at apartment 40. Reaching the apartment, I rang the bell and Dora opened up the door smiling shyly. "Welcome to our beautiful abode," she said as she ushered me in. "You guys have such beautiful interior decor," I said as I looked around the house, enjoying every detail. "Our other flatmate was in charge of the whole thing," Claire said as she walked towards me with a glass of wine. "Oh, you're 3? That's nice. Thank you," I said as I collected the wine and took a sip. Claire showed me where to sit as she pointed me to the love seat in the living room. I sat down as Dora walked in with cookies and brownies. "I see you have both planned the whole day out," I smiled. "Of course, you have to experience quality time in Spain courtesy of us," she said as she brought out pills that looked like Molly and handed me one. Smiling, I collected the pill, put it in my mouth, and pushed it down with the rest of the wine in the glass. Before the pills kicked in, I ate a couple of brownies and had a lot of tequila shots. During the shots, I noticed that Clara and Dora weren't as drunk or as high as I was, but I thought I was imagining it. Exhausted after all the shots and drugs kicked in, I fell asleep right on the couch for I don't know how long. I woke up to very bright lights and a terrible migraine. The hangover kicked in as soon as I opened my eyes. As I tried to stand up to get water, I realized that I was tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. I struggled to get free, wondering how I got there, and then I remembered the alcohol and drugs. Why would Clara and Dora do this? What do they want from me? I heard footsteps and looked up and was shocked to the bone marrow by who I saw. "Surprised to see me? You should be. I look better than you left me." Gloria chuckled as she walked towards me. "You must be wondering how you got here. You see, Clara and Dora are my roommates, and when they told me about this guy they met, the description fit you perfectly. So I told them about how you cheated on me with that bimbo, and then you dumped me. We worked out a plan, and here you are," she explained. "Boys," she called out. "Come on and put him in the box." 2 hefty men came outside with a big box that had fumes coming out. As they put it closer to me, I could feel that the box was a big ice box, and the fumes were the chilly ice air escaping from that very box. "You don't have to do this, Gloria. That was a small mistake. Please, don't do this," I pleaded. Despite my struggles, they put me in the box, and I heard a lock click. The final words I remember before I froze were that of Gloria saying, "See you in hell, loser." I could feel my body turn to ice, and I passed into oblivion. Suddenly I woke up from a shock. It was as if my soul came back from the dead. I could hear some faint music and laughter. It seemed like the girls were partying. Thankfully, I still had my phone with me. With the last attempt at life, I mustered all the strength and heat left in me and sent a message with my location to the receptionist at the hotel I was staying at. The next thing I know, I was in a hospital bed. Apparently, the receptionist saw my message in time and informed the police. Sensing that I was a foreigner, Spanish police, the civil guard, they were quick to respond to my SOS. I strongly believe in karma and regretted so much about cheating on Gloria. But what she did to me was pure evil. We have all had that one period in our lives when we didn't exactly have it all together. Financially, career-wise, and even spiritually. Let me tell you about a time in my life when I was 25 years old. I wasn't a child anymore, but I wasn't yet capable of living the life that I always dreamt about. As I said, I was 25 years old. I've been working some boring corporate jobs that didn't really pay that much. And the worst part was that I didn't love doing it either. Because my salary was modest, to say the least, I couldn't afford to move into an apartment in the good part of town. And believe me, I've been looking for a place for some time.
but all I could manage at the moment was a small one-bedroom apartment, which was in a neighborhood known for its high crime rate. I thought I would manage for a couple of months, hoping that in no time I would find another job that would allow me to start getting my life together. Anyway, I moved into that apartment. The landlady was sweet, though. "Is everything okay, dear? It's not much, but for a single girl like you, I think it would work. Also, if you need anything, I'm just one phone call away," the landlady said after handing me the keys to the place where I'd live for the time being. No, it's great. Thank you so much. I'll be sure to call you if something comes up," I replied to her while I was looking around the place, feeling like it was much smaller than in the pictures. But how could I complain? The rent was pretty affordable, and it permitted me to save up some money at the end of the month. After a couple of days of going to IKEA and some other similar stores, I managed to make the place better in a sense that it captured some of my personality. I bought some abstract paintings of cats and dogs. Yeah, I know it may sound weird, but the landlady doesn't let me keep pets inside, so this was the next best thing. The apartment started to shape up really nicely. "Oh yeah, now it looks like a place I could enjoy living in," I said to myself while I finished decorating and taking a final look around. But there was only one problem, and this is the main issue for why I decided to tell you this story. The elevator. You may think, what could be so problematic about an elevator that it needs an entire story? Bear with me here. This was more than a problem. I should have mentioned that I lived on the 10th floor, so whenever I would go grocery shopping or even any other time, I wasn't going to climb 10 flights of stairs. That was absolutely inhumane. The elevator was very old. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes I could hear people from the elevator shaft screaming that they're stuck, and it took the maintenance guy a couple of hours to come and get the person out. One day I had had enough. I went straight to the building manager, and I was convinced that I will get the problem sorted out that day. I knocked on his door, but he didn't seem to be home. Yet, as I planned to turn around and go back to my apartment, I heard something inside, so I continued knocking several times. Finally, he opened the door. "What?" he asked while looking visibly angry. I think I interrupted something. "I'm sorry to bother you. I live at 1004 on the 10th floor. I just wanted to ask you if you could call anyone to fix the elevator. It's clearly a danger to the people living in the building," I told him politely and even gave him a smile. "No, I will. Someday. Until then, just take the stairs. It's good for you," he replied in a husky voice before slamming the door in my face. I was left without words. This guy could care less. I really thought I was going to fix the elevator problem, but it seems like I failed. Anyway, I went back to my apartment, and I used the stairs this time. There were only 5 flights between his apartment and mine. I finally got to my door, and I was breathing so hard that I thought I might pass out. I know, you might say that I'm a bit out of shape, but the elevator is there for a reason. Why not use it if it's installed? And why not fix it? That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and decided to relax while watching a nice show on Netflix. This entire elevator business really angered me. So, because I drank an entire bottle of wine, I fell asleep on the couch, and then I woke up late. I opened my eyes the next morning and saw that I should really already be out the door so I would get to work on time. In my panicked state, I ate whatever I could find and ran out the door. I had 2 options: go down the stairs and definitely be late for work, or take the elevator and maybe get to work on time. So I chose the latter. I got in the elevator and it went down 2 floors. That's it. And it was stuck. I had to call for help, and for 2 hours I was inside that little box, fearing for my life. And that day, well, that's when it all started to go downhill. After a couple of days, I was again in a situation when I needed to use the elevator. It was one evening when I came home with groceries and some house stuff, and I just couldn't drag them up the stairs. I got in, and before the door could close, a guy came rushing in. He smiled at me, and I saw the most yellow teeth ever. He had a cross tattooed on top of his bald head and appeared a bit odd to me. As the elevator was barely moving, the guy started humming while looking straight at me. He was singing a weird chant or something. I looked ahead, but I could feel him staring me down. I felt really uncomfortable, and I got off on the 5th floor. I ended up carrying the groceries on the stairs. As the days went by, the stupid elevator and the random people I encountered continuously pushed me towards evacuation. But there was this one time that made me move out of the building entirely. I was coming home from work and I saw that the elevator doors were closing, so I rushed to catch it. And as I did, my arm got stuck between the two closing doors. I tried to nudge it out, but I couldn't. That wasn't the terrible part. The terrible part was that the elevator started going up and my wrist was locked between the doors, meaning that I in no time would lose my hand. My face paled. "Help me, I'm stuck, help me." I screamed, but no one answered. The elevator was slowly going up and my hand was slowly approaching the area where it would start to be severed clean off. Then suddenly, the crappy elevator stopped and its doors opened. I hastily pulled my arm out. That was the last time I would ever use that elevator. I could have lost my hand. The next day I went to work determined to get a raise, and in my infuriated state, I actually got it. And it was enough for me to move to a place where I wouldn't have to constantly worry about my safety.
I was bored as usual. I was home, on my phone, scrolling through Instagram, TikTok, and every other platform that I could get my hands on. I admit, I was addicted to social media, but how can you blame me? As a millennial, we didn't exactly grow up with it, but we managed to assimilate it into our lives without a problem, and now it's a part of our daily routine. Hello there, I'm Amber, and I'm 27 years old. I wanted to tell you the story about this bad side of social media. Yes, you heard that right. It does have a bad side, and it's worse than you'd ever imagine. So as I was saying, I was bored, scrolling through my phone when I got a friend request on Snapchat. It was a name I never heard of, Jack Tyler. Sounded innocent enough, so I accepted it. After a couple seconds, I got a snap. It was a car sitting in a parking lot. The picture was taken from behind and it was really blurry, so I couldn't make out if someone was actually in the car or if it was empty, but I could see that the parking lot was empty. I asked the guy what was with that picture, but I didn't get a response, so I decided to leave it like that. I then got a phone call from my friend, Macy. She had something important to tell me about a guy she went on a date with. She continued telling me that he was a weirdo and that he talked about all these horrible things and so on. She told me that he talked about murders and how he always imagined what it's like to be killed or even to kill. Then Macy began telling me that she lied to him. She told the guy that she got a text from me, even though I didn't text her, and that she had to go because it was an emergency. We both laughed and I told her that there are a lot of weirdos out there. After that, Macy wanted to tell me something. She started out saying the following. "So anyway, I'm at..." And that's when the call ended. I always assumed that her phone died. I tried calling her back, but it went straight to voicemail. I didn't think anything more about it. I knew how she was. She was always on her phone, and it was normal that she would run out of battery. So I went into the kitchen to make myself some popcorn, and as I was waiting for the last pop, I got a notification on my phone. I thought it was Macy, but it wasn't. The notification was from Snapchat, and when I opened it, I saw that it was from the same guy who sent me the blurry photo of the car. Now it was a blurry photo of something red and the inside of a car. I couldn't make out anything. It was pretty dark, and beside the colors, I couldn't see any details. I asked the guy again what was his problem and if we knew each other, but he never replied. So my popcorn was ready, so I closed the app, grabbed a bowl, and went into the living room and turned on the TV. I was really in the mood for a romantic comedy, and Netflix was my obvious choice. But before I had the chance to open the app, a breaking news story caught my eye. It was from my town. The news reporter was talking about a young girl who was brutally murdered in her own car. The girl was supposedly alone, and her face was so horribly disfigured, and her teeth were pulled out and her fingers were cut off, and that the police have yet to identify her. I really got scared. How could this thing happen in my own small town? Nothing really happens around here. So I went on Netflix, but not before I double-checked every door and window in my house. That news report really got to me. But there's nothing like a romantic comedy to fix things, right? As the movie started, I really enjoyed it. It was about a guy who really got into this girl, but she was too high and mighty for him. He was from a bad part of town, and she was a posh princess with a lot of money. At halfway through the movie, I got another notification. It was from Snapchat again. I didn't want to open it because I was at a really interesting part of the movie, so I didn't pick up my phone. After about 2 more minutes, I got another notification. And you know how it is. You have to see what you received. The curiosity is so strong when it comes to social media. I paused the movie and I picked up my phone. It was just as I expected. It was from the same guy, and I saw that I received another 2 photos. The first one, from what I could tell, was of a house, but it was still blurry and dark. I couldn't see what house it was, but the second photo caught my eye. It looked like it was of a person inside a home watching TV. It was blurry, so no details popped up, but there was something that did stand out to me. It was something that had a very specific green color. As I raised my eyes and looked next to my TV, I saw my green vase in which I had some flowers. I then analyzed the photo and saw that it was actually a photo of me. I freaked out. I then realized that the house was mine and the photo was of me. I got up, went to my window to see if anyone was there, and then shut my blinds. I was scared. The next thing I knew, my upstairs window had been broken. The sound of glass shards falling on the floor startled me. I went upstairs to see what was going on, and all of a sudden, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around and it was a masked man. He hit me in the head and I fell to the floor, but I didn't lose consciousness. Even though I started bleeding, I got up dizzy and I started running, and he was right after me. I managed to get into a room and close the door. He was hitting the door with his foot, trying to knock it over, and at that moment, I had the idea of getting out of the house through the window. I opened the window and I found myself on the roof. The guy came after me and he rushed towards me with a knife. Fortunately for me, he tripped on a loose tile and fell right off the roof. As I looked to the ground, I saw that the knife he had pierced his chest. In that moment, it hit me. This was the same guy Macy went out on a date with. I wanted to let out a loud scream, but nothing could come out of my mouth. I wanted to cry, but no tears. Suddenly, very suddenly, the world wasn't the same for me. Ever. Death is a horrible thing, especially when it happens to someone close to you. It can affect you deeply. I remember my grandfather, which was a very serious businessman. He started out with nothing and worked his way up in one company where he was just an employee. After he reached a management position, he thought that he had learned enough and decided to start his own business. This is when everything started going great for him. He became very wealthy, and after that, he met my grandmother and they had 2 kids, my Uncle Jack and my mom Mary. When I was 19, my parents got into a terrible car accident and I was left alone in the world. But I was over 18, so I needed to take care of myself. My grandfather, being alone, since my grandma died when I was young, wanted me to come live with him, but I told him I wanted to make it on my own, just like he did. He was proud of me, and we always had a strong bond. Even though I had a low-paying job, he would still watch me from the shadows, as you might say, to make sure that I was okay. After about 1 year, just 2 months after my 20th birthday, which I celebrated with him and a couple of my friends at his house, he passed away. I knew that he had cancer for a couple years, but he looked good and didn't have any pain. Or at least that's what I thought. He might have been putting on a brave face. After his death, I got a phone call from his lawyer. I didn't know what he wanted, and I was surprised that he called me. But soon I found out that my grandfather made a will and testament, and that I needed to be present when he reads it because he had left me something. He also told me that my uncle, which I didn't care that much about because he was always a jerk, will be present. He told me the date, and after 2 days, I was at his office, all dressed up in a suit, looking professional. As I was talking with him, my uncle and his wife came in. They didn't even come to his funeral. I had to take care of everything. Anyway, I really didn't stand them. As the lawyer was talking about my grandfather, saying some nice words, my uncle's wife interrupted him and told him to get to the good part. She wanted to know what she got. It really ticked me off, but I decided to remain calm and not say anything. The lawyer took a long look at her, and then he took out the will. He started reading, and not long after, my uncle found out that he only got my grandfather's dog. He was a German Shepherd, but he was really old. My uncle was outraged. He got up and started yelling, saying that he doesn't want a stupid dog. He asked, "What about the house and the money?" The lawyer smiled, as if he was enjoying the moment, seeing how the two were reacting and that they didn't care about my grandfather at all. He continued by saying that the house and half of the money will go to me and half will go to charity. His wife started cursing and left the room, slamming the door behind her. I got up and I told her not to talk badly about my grandfather, and then my uncle followed her. I didn't see the two of them for the next month or so, but I took my grandpa's dog in. He was so nice and sweet. Anyway, one evening I get a phone call. It was from a number that I didn't have in my contacts. I answered, and believe it or not, it was my uncle. I asked him if something happened, and he told me that he just wanted to make sure I'm all right, and that we're family after all, and that we should take care of each other. I agreed with what he said, but we never really hit it off. He invited me for lunch the next day, and I said yes. The next day, we met at a local bistro. He was already waiting for me, and as soon as I sat down, he was being so nice. He asked me what I wanted to eat because it's his treat and stuff like that. I found it weird, and I was right. Soon enough, he brought up the inheritance. He told me that he needed some money for a medical procedure and that things are not so good at work and he would love to open up his own business. He pestered me with all kinds of reasons for me to give him half of the money my grandfather left me, and I started to get annoyed. Finally, I told him that I knew he didn't want to bond as a family and he was only after the money, so I left. After a couple of days, I got in my car to head over to the store so I could buy some groceries. I started pulling away, and all of a sudden, as I tried to stop the car because a red light was approaching, the car didn't stop. The brake pedal was soft and didn't do anything. As I was approaching the light, I saw that some kids were crossing the street, and in the last moment, I turned the wheel and went full speed into a tree. In that moment, everything blacked out. I don't know what happened next, but all I remember is that I woke up a day later in the hospital. The doctor said that the crash was really bad and that I was lucky to be alive. I hit my head, but I was recovering nicely. The car was just checked out. Why would that happen? I kept thinking about it for the next couple of days until I was allowed to go home. The next day, I saw that I got a notification on my computer saying that I needed to free up some space. I had a security camera that filmed everything, and once in a while, I needed to delete some footage. As I was going through it, I saw something. There were two people, one night before I had my crash in my driveway, doing something to my car. I didn't know who they were because they had masks on, but after that, they cut my brakes. As they were running, one of them fell and their mask flew off the person's head. That's when I saw that it was my uncle's wife. I called the police, and after taking fingerprints and even finding a strand of hair in my car along with the video, they charged them for trying to murder me so that the inheritance will be passed over to them, being my closest relatives. My uncle begged me not to press charges and even said that it was his wife's idea all along and that he just wanted us to bond as uncle and nephew. They locked them up, and I haven't heard from them since.
I stepped into the elevator after receiving the key to my room. It was finally the week I had looked forward to for days. The week to let go of my worries and just enjoy the bliss of nature. I was happy for the beach and the mini pool around the hotel. This was the perfect place to relax. Holding on to my bags tightly in the elevator, I waited patiently for the elevator to get to the floor my hotel would be. "Hey, beautiful." I heard a thick voice behind me. It was the guy that was in the elevator when I stepped in. Why in the world would you call a stranger you meet in the elevator beautiful? Some people really didn't know how to communicate. "Yeah?" I asked, confused as to why he called me. I would have never turned to answer, but seeing that it was just the two of us in the elevator, he must have been talking to me. "I'm Zach. You look really pretty though. Mind if I touch your hair or hug you? You look really clean," he said while looking at me with emotions that I could not decipher. I responded in the negative, feeling uncomfortable. "Come on, pretty. That is gonna make me sad. I'm sure you don't want to see a sad or angry guy like me. Let's do this in a simple manner," he said, walking to me in an intimidating way. I prayed silently for the elevator to open soon, coupled with a prayer that he should not be on the same floor as I was. I moved away from him as he stepped closer, my pulse and fear rising. Don't run from me, baby girl. You... Before he could finish his sentence, the elevator's door opened and I rushed out with my bags, happy to be away from him. I opened my door quickly, hoping he was not after me. I rushed in and closed the door behind me, not taking any chances of anyone sneaking up on me for whatever reason. Hopefully, that would be the last time I would see him. I slept in that night and ordered room service to fill my stomach. I was really tired, and the guy I met earlier just made it all worse. I slept off listening to my favorite song, Love Me Like You Do by Ellie Goulding. The song always had a way of putting me in the right mood even if everything was going off. It was the song I needed for the mindset that everything would be better tomorrow and things would make absolute sense. The light rays entered the room through the small opening between the curtains, waking me up. I smiled to myself, taking it as a sign that the day would be good. I wanted to walk around instead of just sitting in the room ordering room service, so I could enjoy the whole experience that came with this vacation. After dressing up and getting ready for the day ahead, I went out of my room and headed for the beach first. It was a good place to be in such hot weather. As I stepped into the elevator, it was too late before I realized he was in the elevator with me. The door already closed, and it was pointless trying to open it after I just got in. Why is he always in this elevator? Does he sleep here? Why do I have to meet him early in the morning? Such a great way to start the day, I thought angrily as I looked pointedly away from the weird guy. We meet again. I have been waiting for you all night, he spoke, his voice like that of someone who's been smoking for years and gradually losing his voice. I warned him that if he should try to touch me, I would report to the management. Oh, he shivered sarcastically. Linda, is that a threat I hear? Linda? I didn't remember introducing myself to him yesterday. How did he get my name? I was lost in my thoughts before realizing that something was stroking my hair. He was moving me towards the wall of the elevator. I pushed him off, carefully enough to not let his head hit the wall of the other side. I wasn't going to be responsible for the death of anyone. The hotel would have to deal with this themselves. The elevator opened and I ran out. I better not see him around anymore when he got kicked out. I tried to calm down as I walked up to the receptionist. Good morning, ma'am. Hope you had a good night. She sounded professional, probably how they were taught to act around their customers. Yes, thank you. I need to report something that I would be glad if something is done about it. I had my fingers crossed. Who knows what the weird guy could do next? What could that be, ma'am? I explained my experience with the guy in the elevator, waving my arms in agitation. I described how the guy looked to her and mentioned his name. Zach? She said his name continuously, trying to remember if someone who fit into the description came to mind while checking the lists of the customers on her computer. That would be Mr. Zach Hall, she asked. Ma'am, I think you have the description mixed up. Mr. Zach is a very good customer of this hotel and someone who has been coming here for a long time. I don't think he could do any of those things you mentioned. He is a good man. I know him personally, she said, her eyes throwing weird glances at me like I was crazy. You probably don't understand me. I'm being stalked by a customer and he is being a threat to me. You're supposed to investigate and see that I'm telling the truth here. What exactly are you telling me? She informed me that even the manager would tell me the same thing. Apparently, Mr. Zach was a respected person in their hotel. I walked angrily into the elevator hoping the so-called Zach was not there. Thankfully, he wasn't there. As the elevator door opened to my floor, I stormed angrily into my room, ordering room service as I got in. Food was as important as safety. I needed to eat. I heard a knock after about 15 minutes. It was the food I ordered. Finally, someone was listening to something I needed. I asked the person to come in. It was Zach. Surprise? Miss me? His face held a sinister look as he spoke. He locked the door behind him. I dove for the telephone beside me and dialed the front desk. He ran for me as I screamed help into the receiver. All I expected from you was a little courtesy. He banged my head on the table and my vision swam. My door opened and 2 security guards rushed in, carrying Zach off. The receptionist sent them up after hearing my cry for help. Zach was taken to the police station. That night was the last one I spent in that hotel. My vacation came to an abrupt end.
As I struggled in with our last luggage, I thought of telling my husband that we should go visit our neighbors and invite them over for our housewarming. But no one seemed to be in when we checked. Our housewarming was cool, with a bit of friends and family around. We had only one house next to ours, surrounded by beautiful trees and hills that made everything perfect, just the way myself and Tom had always imagined. The next morning came with its beauty as the sun peeped through the hills. I admired this beauty from where I lay on the bed. Tom's eyes were tightly shut, and he didn't look like he was ready to wake anytime soon. As I got up from the bed, I heard a shout from outside. I tiptoed to see through the curtain. "Oh, finally, our neighbors," I whispered. I saw an elderly man in his 70s and his wife, who looked a bit younger than him, faced each other as though there was a conflict of interest. They exchanged words I couldn't hear. Just when I wanted to listen more, just so I could pick a word, I felt a peck on my cheek. It was Tom. "Good morning, dear. I woke up hungry. And what's up with the shouting I'm hearing?" Tom said as he pulled me downstairs. Later that evening, Tom and I were out. My husband seemed to be very busy trimming the flowers and taking the pictures of each bird that flew as he constantly screamed my name. "Amy, come see this!" I quickly used that opportunity to pay our neighbors a visit. As I stood in front of their door with a basket full of flowers, and as I made to knock, I heard a voice from behind me. By the time I turned around to see who it was, I noticed it was an old lady with a purple cat on her shoulder. "Oh," I spoke with a voice surviving from the shock. I'm sorry, I stammered as I tried to mention my name. "Yes, you are the new neighbors, the Stones. Nice meeting you," she smiled as she spoke. She continues to talk. "I'm sorry we missed your housewarming. Matt and I can't make it up to you. Matt is my husband. I brought this." I passed the flowers to her. "Thank you," she said sharply as she collected it. She invited me in, but I hesitated. "Where is Matt?" I asked curiously. Her countenance changed as she replied, "Matt is in bed." "Oh, I guess I'll check back later." I don't want to get my husband worried because I didn't tell him I was coming. The next evening, Tom went for a jog while I decided to peep at our neighbors through the window. The old lady happened to be busy digging something up in their little garden. I watched as she emptied a sack where she dug up. It was the purple cat. "You're a fishy old lady," I whispered thoughtfully. It was just 2 months we moved in, and we still hadn't cleaned some parts in our room. After Tom went to get us some toiletries in town one morning, I kept myself busy with house chores. It occurred to me that Tom and I never opened the wardrobe since we moved in. As I opened the wardrobe, a bit of dust welcomed me. I saw a picture in a brown envelope. The picture was that of a purple cat. The cat in the picture looked so much like the old lady's cat. Could that be Linda's cat? I thought to myself. I further checked the envelope and saw a small diary. The diary was Linda's, the immediate past occupant. I read each page of how loving her husband was and how she started getting curious about the neighbors. The old lady, how happy she was the day she got her cat. At this point, I was already seated on the bed with the diary in my hand. I continued reading until I read the part where the old lady told her to give her husband drugs that would turn him into a vegetable, after she'd gone to meet her for an elderly advice on her marriage. Linda wrote how she refused and how she would constantly hear a strange movement inside her house. I flipped through the pages to the next page. It was blank. I kept flipping until I saw a page where Linda wrote, "I'm scared of my neighbors. She's nuts." My heart skipped a beat as I read the words. I kept flipping the next blank pages until I saw another page. "The old lady took all I have. Suicide is what I'm left with." I couldn't wait to continue reading. I ran over to where I placed my phone and dialed my husband's number, but the network was bad. I heard a knock on the door. On opening it, I saw it was the old lady with a new pet, a blue-eyed cat. I stood at the door for a while with no idea what to do or say. What does she want, I thought. Can I come in? She asked with a smile. Okay, I said, confused. How's Matt? I asked her. Oh, Matt is sick. The doctor said he has a spinal issue. She spoke unconcerned as she sat down. Sick? Does that mean he can't walk anymore? I asked. Yes, he certainly can't. His 2 legs are resting. They should rest, she said with a choking giggle. When people rest, you get freedom. I told you to let your husband rest too. It's beautiful to see them dependent on your instructions, she said as she held my hands. Immediately, I took my hands off of hers and screamed at her. So it was you. You took everything from her. No, I didn't. I made her free, she said with her eyes wide open. Get out of my house, I screamed as I rushed to the door. Or I'll call the cops on you, I said more angrily. The old lady didn't look remorseful. Amy, no one calls the cops on me. If you do, you'll pay for it, she snubbed as she walked out. I hurriedly drove to the police station in downtown. Miss Stone, that building has been abandoned for years. I deduced that you should go on a break to clear off your mind. The voice of the police I met at the station re-echoed in my thoughts as I walked back to my car. I walked out of the police station much worse than I had entered. I was so discouraged. No, I can't sleep a night in that place. Not anymore, I whispered to myself as I walked back to my car. My phone rang. It was my husband. Tom, we've got to move today. These were the words that escaped my lips as I kept crying.
Tom came over to where I was at the station's parking lot. I showed him the envelopes containing the diary. We called a house agent who immediately fixed us up another space in town. We moved out that evening.